Hello everybody, and welcome back to One Nerd to Rule Them All. And in today's video, we jump back into the Game of Thrones universe. There are many blades that are well known throughout the world of fantasy. Blades from the world of Tolkien and The Witcher, but of course the world of Game of Thrones has many blades for us to pick from. In today's video, we will look at some of the most famous blades from each house, their current holders, and their whereabouts. Now, we have a lot to uncover, so let's get into the video. Let's start with Ice. Ice is the ancestral sword of House Stark. This two-handed sword was forged with magic in the form of Valyrian freehold around 400 years before Robert Baratheon's rule. The blade is described as dark as smoke and wide as a man's hand, and very tall. The blade was held by House Stark for over 4 centuries, and was passed down from generation to generation, eventually falling into the hands of Eddard Stark, its last Stark bearer before his death. When Ned was betrayed and executed, he was killed by his own blade by Sir Ilyn Payne. Payne held the blade until Tywin Lannister requested that it be melted down to make 2 blades. Tubbo Mott, a Volantene, reforged it into 2 longswords. These blades were Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper. Moving on to Longclaw. Longclaw is a Valyrian steel bastard sword that was the ancestral weapon of House Mormont for 5 centuries. When Lord Jorah Mormont retired and his lordship was taken, from his lordship to take the Black and command the Night's Watch, he passed it to his son and heir, Sir Jorah Mormont. When Jorah went into exile after trying to sell some poachers into slavery, he left the sword, and Jorah's sister Mage returned it to him at the Wall. Years later, Jorah gave Longclaw to Jon Snow as a reward for saving his life from a White. Before giving it to Jon, he had the pommel remade, replacing the bear with a direwolf, the sigil of House Stark. Let's move on to Heartsbane. Heartsbane is the ancestral Valyrian sword of House Tarly. The Tarlys held this blade for some 500 years, and is usually displayed proudly on the mantle in an antler sword stand at the seat of Horn Hill. The hilt is wrought in the shape of a bow and arrow, with the pommel fashioning into an arrow fletchling, and the crossguard forming the limbs of the bow. This reflects the sigil of House Tarly, the huntsman. The scabbard appears to have been carved from wood with a large gnarl in the centre. The wood itself is largely left uncovered and undecorated, leaving a unique pattern that evokes a matching theme of the forests, the huntsman's domain. In the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, Heartsbane has been in the possession of House Tarly for the same 500 years. Like Ice, it is a two-handed greatsword. It is currently wielded by Lord Randyll Tarly, and like the lands and titles of House Tarly, will pass to Dickon Tarly after Randyll passes away. At the Battle of Ashford during Robert's Rebellion, Randyll cut down Lord Catharin, a former royalist who had defected to Robert after his defeat at the Battle of Summerhill, wielding Heartsbane. After the battle, according to Stannis Baratheon, Randyll also used Heartsbane to behead Catherine's corpse, sending the severed head to King Aerys II as a token of loyalty. Moving on to Brightroar. Brightroar, again, is a Valyrian steel blade that was the ancestral weapon of House Lannister. It was lost when Tommen II Lannister, King of the Rock, took it on his expedition to the ruins of Valyria and disappeared. For a while, Tywin tried to buy Valyrian blades from lesser noble households to try and replace the blade that was lost, but he was always rebuffed. Instead, lords preferred to offer their daughters in marriage rather than part from such valuable heirlooms. Tywin's youngest brother, Geryon, went into an expedition of the Valyrian Peninsula approximately in 291 after the conquest with the goal of finding Brightroar, but like Tommen, he never returned. After all other attempts to regain a blade failed, Tywin Lannister decided to melt down ice to make the 2 lesser blades from its Valyrian steel, to ensure his house held a blade once again. Moving on to Lightbringer. Now Lightbringer is not owned by a house, but is still a legendary blade. Lightbringer is a sword of legend, forged and wielded by Azor Ahai, chosen by the Lord of the Light to fight the darkness. Legend says that the blade was forged with the lifeblood of his wife, Nissa Nissa. The sword was said to glow and radiate heat, burning whoever touches it. According to prophecy, Lightbringer would be pulled from the fire by the Lord's chosen, the prince that was promised, and champion of the Lord of Light. It is unknown whether the real Lightbringer is just a legend or if it actually exists, and if it does, what happened to it. There are many fan theories that it is not an actual sword but a metaphor, and it could even be a person. Moving on to the Targaryen blades. Let's start with Dark Sister. This was the name of the Valyrian steel sword belonging to Visenya Targaryen, the sister wife of Aegon the Conqueror. A great warrior, she used it in battle as well as riding her dragon Vhagar during Aegon's conquest. Dark Sister is comparatively thin and a light blade because it was the chosen weapon of a female warrior. Though as it is made of Valyrian steel, it is still very strong and sharp. So sharp in fact that Visenya used this very blade to cut the cheek of her brother husband Aegon to prove to him that he needed better guards, forming the Kingsguard. By the reign of Viserys I, some 60 years after Visenya's death, Dark Sister passed to Daemon Targaryen, younger brother of King Viserys Targaryen. Daemon would use this blade in many battles, but it was used most famously by him to kill his nephew, the kinslayer Aemond Targaryen, after jumping from his dragon Caraxes and stabbing his nephew through his eye, sacrificing himself also. The blade would be recovered from Aemond's skull after 5 years, but his body would remain beneath the water. It later passed to Aemon the Dragon Knight, and then to Brandon Rivers. The sword was ultimately lost during the Blackfire Rebellion, so its whereabouts remain unknown. Now let's talk about Blackfire. Again, this is a Valyrian steel bastard sword that originally belonged to Aegon I Targaryen. He carried this during the conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. Afterwards it became the treasured ancestral blade of House Targaryen, carried by kings and princes. When kings held court, this sword was used as a scepter. A little over 100 years before the War of the Five Kings, King Aegon IV the Unworthy gave Blackfire to his bastard son Daemon Waters, a great warrior, instead of his lawful son, Daeron. Many thought that this was a sign that his father favoured him to rule. Afterwards, Daemon founded his own cadet branch of House Targaryen, House Blackfire, taking its name from the sword, and he himself became known as Daemon Blackfire. On his deathbed, Aegon IV legitimised all of his bastard children, among them Daemon Blackfire. Daeron succeeded his father as King Daeron II Targaryen, but eventually Daemon Blackfire rose up in a civil war to try and replace him on the throne, known as the Blackfire Rebellion. The sword was lost at the end of this war, and like its sister blade, its whereabouts remains unknown. As I've mentioned them in this video, we'll finish off by talking about the 2 blades reforged from Ned Stark's blade Ice. There are many more blades in the world of Game of Thrones, but these are some of the most popular, and those who may only be familiar with the world of Game of Thrones through the TV series and its spin-off, House of the Dragon, may know these blades. But I'm happy to do a part 2 to cover more. So let's talk about Widow's Wail and Oathkeeper. Widow's Wail was given to Joffrey Baratheon by his grandfather Tywin on his wedding day, who used it to cut a rare copy of Lies of Four Kings, written by Grand Maester Caith, which Tyrion gifted him. In the books, Kevan Lannister gives him this book. Also in the book, Joffrey used his sword to cut open a pigeon pie at his wedding feast. The blade would be in his possession for exactly 1 day, as he was poisoned at his wedding feast. The sword is placed beside Joffrey's body in the funeral pyre in the Sept of Baelor. As it currently stands in the books, King Tommen currently owns this blade. Moving on to Oathkeeper. This sword has black and red ripples throughout the steel. Its scabbard glitters gold and is decorated with a row of lion heads and smouldering red rubies. The pommel has a golden lion's head with ruby eyes that shines like 2 red stars. Upon receiving this blade, Jaime is angry with the sword that is given to him, thinking it was a cruel joke of his father and uncle, given that such a blade would be wasted on him since he had lost his right hand. Kevan is upset to hear how Jaime feels about the sword, saying that the gift was heartfelt, but Jaime is not mollified. After returning to King's Landing, a short time after the Purple Wedding, Jaime and Brienne are stopped by Loras Tyrell, who believe that Brienne is responsible for Renly's death. Jaime orders Brienne to be locked up for her own protection. Thus Jaime gives her this sword in the Tower Cell, not in the White Sword Tower. He also suggests the name Oathkeeper to her, claiming it is appropriate that she will be defending Ned Stark's daughter with Ned Stark's own steel. This brings us to the end of today's video. Like I mentioned before, there are many other blades in the world of Game of Thrones, such as Needle and of course the dagger, so if you guys would like to see a second part of this video, then just let me know in the comments down below. In the description, you'll find 2 links. The first to my other half, Rothmer's channel, so if you enjoy gaming content, specifically MMOs and action RPGs, then please feel free to check that out. If you enjoy Warhammer content, then might I recommend checking out our joint channel, where myself and Rothmer build, paint and battle our armies against each other. So if that interests you, then please take a look at that also. Anyway, that'll be it from me today. Hope you guys have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world. And as always, Bye for now.